Sure. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our briefing. So we'll start off this morning with an update to the numbers. Since the last time we talked, 1,404 more Philadelphians have been diagnosed with COVID. As of yesterday, we're seeing an average of 274 new cases per day, which is slightly lower from what I reported last week. 3% of test results we're receiving are positive, which is also slightly lower than last week. This number is dropping because there's so many people getting tested, around 5,000 per day. So we're fairly confident that that positivity rate means that we're catching most of the cases in the city. In terms of vaccinations, at least 84.2% of adults have gotten at least one dose, and now 69.3% of adults are fully vaccinated. Yesterday, we reported that about 47,250 teens between 12 and 17 had received at least one dose of vaccine. And finally, about 10,800 people in Philadelphia have received a third dose of vaccine. Nearly 1,000 of those doses were administered this weekend as booster doses, but we believe this is an undercount as many of our providers are still reporting from the weekend. We're currently working to post counts of booster doses on the dashboard and hope to be able to update you regularly on that. So speaking of booster doses, I did want to take the opportunity to talk about who needs one and how people can go about getting a booster if they're eligible. Late last week, the CDC recommended that people who are over 65, who live in a nursing home, or who are between the ages of 50 and 64 and have an underlying medical condition that puts them at higher risk, should get a booster dose 6 months after their second dose of the Pfizer vaccine. They use the word should in this recommendation because the data for a booster dose is stronger in these groups. People who are between the ages of 18 and 49 and have an underlying medical condition, and people 18 to 64 who work in jobs with a higher risk of COVID exposure, like healthcare workers, teachers, or other frontline workers, may get a booster dose 6 months after the second dose of Pfizer. They use the word may because the evidence for these groups is less strong, and there was more debate among the scientists about the need for a booster. But as we've seen here in Philadelphia, frontline workers are at higher risk of COVID, so we're glad to see that the CDC included them in their booster recommendation. It's been a while since we talked about which medical conditions put people at risk of more severe outcomes from COVID, and the list has expanded somewhat. It's too long a list to read out here, but I do want to note that overweight, meaning a BMI of 25 or higher, obesity, and being a current or a former smoker have been found to increase risk. And it's probably worth noting that if you're overweight, and please keep in mind that a BMI of 25 is only slightly overweight, or if you're a current or a former smoker and you've not yet been vaccinated, let alone had your booster, it's time to take your health seriously and get your shot. Research has shown that over time, especially in people over 65, the Pfizer vaccine may become slightly less effective against hospitalizations. You'll notice that I said less effective instead of not effective. The Pfizer vaccine is still effective, and like the other approved COVID vaccines, it's still the best way to avoid severe COVID and death. Booster doses are intended to help keep their effectiveness high for the people who are most likely to have severe COVID if they catch it. Booster doses are not just a COVID vaccine thing. In fact, most of the vaccines that our children get have boosters. They're a normal part of the vaccination process. For Pfizer, the booster dose is exactly the same as the first two doses, and side effects are very similar. Yes, you will get a sore arm and possibly a slight fever, but you've gone through 18 months of a pandemic and done much harder things. You can do this. You can get your booster at any local vaccine site that has Pfizer vaccine. Check vaccines.gov for locations that have Pfizer, and bring your vaccine card with you so they can double check the dates for you. We have not yet heard anything from the FDA or CDC about if people who got Moderna or Johnson & Johnson vaccine yet will need boosters. But if they do, we'll be ready to give them out as soon as they're approved. Finally, the companies who developed the Pfizer vaccine announced that they have submitted safety and efficacy data to the FDA on their vaccine gathered from clinical trials with children between 5 and 12. I'm very excited to hear this good news, but we've got to remember this announcement was just in a press release, and we're waiting to hear from the FDA and CDC before we do anything. I'm hopeful that this announcement means we'll be able to vaccinate our children sooner rather than later, But as we saw with the booster doses, there are many steps that still need to happen before we can start. Until that happens, there's plenty we can do to keep our children safe. Most importantly, every adult and teen around them should be vaccinated. They should wear masks when they're indoors and around others, practice good hand hygiene, and stay home if they're sick. Hopefully, it's not too much longer, and we'll let you know the latest we hear on updates of this. So to wrap up, if you'd like more information, please visit our website at phila.gov/COVID. And if you have questions, please call our COVID call center at 215-685-5488.